really does make sense for us to assign a couple of teams. But just to reassure the committee, we have plenty of resources available to be able to do that. We also currently have 6 statutory audits underway. We have an audit of the State Bar that we'll be issuing tomorrow, typical audits that we do on an annual basis of the state's financial statements, a cash count, security count, those sorts of things. In addition, we will be issuing several follow-up reviews over the course of the next couple of months. Anytime my office has resources available, we've met our statutory responsibilities, we've met our audit committee responsibilities as far as any audits the committee has approved and directed us to perform. We have the ability to conduct follow-up work on previous audits that we have done. We have several follow-ups underway, and in fact we'll be issuing those reports, those follow-up conclusions and additional recommendations to the agencies in June and July, and then we have a couple we'll be publishing in September and October. The reason I mention this, we think this is a very valuable activity that we perform, but also just to reassure the committee that when the committee meets again in August, a lot of those staff will be freed up, so we will have resources available in August to commence any and all audits that the committee may approve then as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, that pretty much concludes my comments as far as the status report.
Thank you very much for your report. Does any members have any questions for our state auditor? Ms. Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, how do you decide which follow-ups to do and what priorities to put on them?
Thank you, Ms. Baker. What we do is we typically want to give an agency at least a year to try to implement recommendations because we do have a follow-up process, 60 days, 6 months, 1 year. And then we will take a look at the responses we've received from agencies. In some cases, if an agency hasn't fully responded in our view, and it's a public policy issue that's critically important, there are a couple follow-ups we're currently doing on child welfare services, child welfare fraud. So we consider the policy issue as well. Also, if we had made recommendations where there could have been cost savings to the state or perhaps additional revenue that the state could have generated, those would be higher on our list. So those are the types of factors that we consider.
Thank you very much. Any other further questions for our state auditor? Once again, we want to encourage all members to please report to room 447 as soon as possible so that we can establish a quorum at the Joint Legislative Audit Committee that is in session at the present time. Members want to make mention once again, we have 3 items before us today. Member Gonzalez has withdrawn her audit request regarding the City of Irvine. We will follow the normal procedure and take sign-in order first, and then members' requests after such time. We understand that we have agencies present. They will give their presentation immediately after the state auditor has given her analysis regarding the audit request before us. At this time, we want to move expeditiously. We would ask Member Irwin if you can please come to the table. She has an audit request before us, Department of General Services, Real Estate Services Division, and that's item 2015-117. Good morning, Member Irwin, and as soon as you're ready, you can proceed.
All right,
your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair Gibson and members. I am requesting that the committee approve an audit of the performance of the Real Estate Services Division of the Department of General Services, specifically the branches of the division that are responsible for planning, design, and construction of major and minor capital outlay projects requested by state agencies. We need to know if this work is being done efficiently, effectively, and economically. Numerous examples of projects requested by state agencies indicate that these standards are not being met. State agencies experience design and construction costs that do not seem justifiable or reasonable, have significantly escalated costs from their original estimates, and in some instances have spent several years awaiting commencement of project construction. File room door replacements that cost $17,000, adding a wall at a cost of $60,000, Construction project request made in 2013 where the agency has been charged for design costs of over $100,000, but construction has not yet begun and no cost estimates have been provided. The legislature's responsibility is to ensure the careful use of state funds, and the need to provide space to allow agency staff to conduct business requires that we are confident that the Real Estate Services Division has the personnel and best practices necessary to be effective. I believe that an audit would be instructive in terms of identifying what processes are used to determine the scope, timeline, and cost estimates for requests, why comparable projects in the private sector cost far less, what process for communications regarding change orders and revised costs, and if state resources are being used appropriately. The Department of General Services and the Real Estate Services Division are responsible for work to state-owned and leased buildings across the state. The legislature has oversight responsibility to ensure the best management practices are used to ensure cost-effective stewardship. My audit is an opportunity to provide critical information on the practices as a first step toward improvement. I respectfully request your approval of this audit.
Thank you very much, Member Irwin. At this point, we'd like to have the state auditor give her presentation, her analysis, and then after which we'll ask the affected agency to please come up and take a seat and give your presentation, and then we will have members to ask questions if they so choose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Assemblymember Irwin commented in her opening comments with respect to this request, it's the Department of General Services, Office of Real Estate Services Division, typically referred to as ORED, so you'll hear me say that. One of the first objectives she's asked us to accomplish is really looking at the structure within DGS and the structure of this division to determine whether or not it is structured, it's set up appropriately so that it can effectively provide services to state agencies that either own a building or lease facilities. The biggest part of this audit request is looking at actual projects, requests that have been made by state agencies since 2011. She's asked us to go back to 2011. I think that's important because one of the objectives is asking us how many of these projects have actually been completed, so you need a certain time frame there. So we'll be looking at a sample of project requests by various state agencies, really assessing the effectiveness of OREDS, the division, and its process for developing cost estimates, timelines, scope of projects, how well are they, as she indicated, communicating with the specific state agency that had that project request. Looking at costs, and to the extent we can, we have a caveat, to the extent possible, try to compare some of the cost estimates for these projects to comparable projects in the private sector. To the extent we can do that, we will. We will certainly attempt, but that's an objective that she's asked us to try to accomplish. Communication, as far as communicating with each of the agencies at the beginning as far as planning and estimating, but also during the change order process. And why are things changing? Why are things taking longer? Why are cost estimates changing? She wants answers to those types of questions. And how well is DGS OREDS communicating with the individual state agencies that they're working with? She's also asked us to look at billing, looking at the actual invoices and are agencies being invoiced for projects or specific elements of projects, and is that work actually being done? So, just making sure that these invoices accurately reflect the work that has been done for each particular state agency. As I indicated, an objective is looking at the proportion of the total projects requested. What proportion of those have actually been completed over the last 4 years, going back to 2011? And then looking at OREDS again and what types of training the department provides for the employees of the division to allow them to perform their jobs and working with state agencies as efficiently as possible. So a relatively straightforward audit, strong focus on OREDS, of course. The budget for this audit is 2,690 hours. It'll take us about 6 or 7 months, so we would have this audit done by either December or January when members return.
Thank you very much. The affected agency, would you please come forward and take a seat to my left? Thank you very much. You could please state your name and your department.
Good morning, Jamal Amin. As of 2 weeks ago, Acting Deputy Director for Real Estate Services Division. Thank you for having us.
Brian O'Dell, the Department of General Services.
Please feel free to proceed.
I guess normally under these circumstances, our typical response is we look forward to the audit, and certainly we'll work as hard as we can to provide any and all information necessary. I would only add that the issues that were brought up certainly by Assemblywoman and others that are interested in DGS and RESD issues are ones that we're looking at internally already anyways, and certainly from a fresh perspective, there's been a lot of focus from the governor's office, from the GovOps agency secretary on many of the issues that were just brought up, and so we're very much interested not only in the outcome of the audit, but moving forward with more efficient ways of operating as an agency.
Thank you very much. Members, anyone have any questions for the department, the agency, and or the member?
No questions, Mr. Chair. I move approval of the request.
We can't take action. We have to establish a quorum, but thank you very much. Member Baker.
Thank you, and thank you, Member Irwin, for a very good audit topic and focus that it has. I have two questions for Madam Auditor, just to make sure that two areas are covered by this, and if not, if that could be possible. One is that the scope of this audit will look at anything in the bidding process that either contributes to costs being higher than they should be or impairs the ability of the state to contain costs in any way. If that is the scope, and within this, we've seen from other state vendors from time to time, whether it's computer systems or otherwise, that there is often something in the contracting and bidding process that is flawed that ultimately leads to increased costs later. Will that be part of the scope of this audit?
I think we would cover some of that when we're looking at the divisions and their practices and policies, and certainly working with the particular state agencies as far as what project they need done and then how they go about estimating costs. That would, I think we could go back to looking at whether it was competitively bid, how was this vendor selected, that sort of thing. In some of the objectives under Objective 3, some of the steps we have in there.
Because I think that we've learned from other issues where we've seen cost overruns also that if a vendor has a track record of cost overruns, if that's part of the consideration in the bidding process and in the contracting process, and I would just encourage us to look at how much we're using that institutional knowledge that our state should have of vendors with the state. I would just encourage that to be part of, if possible, if the member agrees and the committee agrees, the analysis. The second question I have, you mentioned that you will be looking at the training that is given to those who are part of this process. Will the audit also include, are they executing the rules that they are trained to do to engage in appropriate oversight over a project so that they can be on top of whether or not there are change orders required, whether or not there are cost overruns that are happening. So certainly looking at the training is important, but the execution is also equally important, and I wonder if the audit would include that as well.
Absolutely. That's a key element of the audit request from Ms. Irwin, and that would be absolutely included under Objective 3, where how well are they executing. And I think her interest, speaking for, is are people getting, is training an issue, but certainly looking at how well they're executing their responsibilities. That's a key element of the request.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Hearing none, at this time we would like the public to feel free to come to the microphone to provide any testimonies or comments that you may have regarding this item before us. You have 2 minutes to articulate your particular position. Seeing and hearing none, we'll hold that item until we establish a quorum, then we'll take action. So we thank you very much. If you can just stick close until we establish a quorum. Thank you very much. Public comments is closed on that item. We're going to move. We see our next presenter, Member Eggman, who will be speaking about dual status youth, item number 2015-115. Good morning and welcome.
You're high tech.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Nice to see Stockton in the house. Good morning, Chair and members. I'm here today to talk about the request to explore dual status youth in our system. Foster youth who currently enter our juvenile justice system are called dual status or crossover youth, because they're governed by two different bodies of law: jurisdiction to child welfare dependency, foster youth, and or the juvenile delinquency system. And dual status youth make up a small portion in California, but about 3,000 children are affected every year or in these two different statuses. And because these kids are disconnected from their parents and relatives and their foster youth, some small infraction that at home you might get grounded will often find these children then in the juvenile justice system. All too often, then, they don't get the care and the continuation, the collaboration between the agencies that they need. They might be on a certain track with counseling and things. They go into the juvenile justice system, and oftentimes that continuity is lost. We are the only state in the nation who does not have dual status across the state. In 2004, a law was passed that said counties could enter into this kind of program where they had this crossover, this dual status. But since then, we don't have any data. We don't have any data that says, are these children faring better than children who are in a more collaborative program, or are children who go from one system to the next and perhaps back again and then back again, are they doing okay? So that's the point of this request, is to be able to take a look at what are the outcomes 10 years later of these counties who have entered into this agreement. What are the outcomes of the kids from the counties who have not? And is there a better way to do it, or are we doing it to a great deal of effect right now? So that, in essence, is the basis of this request. Again, in looking at this, the huge interest in this population, couldn't find a lot of data on it, and thought this would be the place to come to say, let's find out some more before we think about enacting legislation. This pre-step of having the auditor take a look at what the outcomes are for our youth. And I have Ed Howard here with me to testify.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Ed Howard, Senior Counsel with the Children's Advocacy Institute. Just a few quick additional notes. The first is to note that of crossover youth, there are disproportionately youth of color and disproportionately female. In fact, crossover youth are female in greater percentages than the overall population of juvenile offenders. We've last looked at this in 2007. It's not solely the data that I think that we're interested in looking at. We have 58 different counties who are apparently doing this 58 different ways, and one of the points of when you're dealing with literally our most vulnerable population of young people. So I think it's more than time to take a hard look at how the counties are doing it, and if there are particular counties that are doing it really well, we want to know that so we can emulate those in other counties, or if there are enduring issues that the legislature needs to address, we should address them. The legislature does try and deal with issues related to dual status when they come up. Last year, for example, Assemblymember Skinner authored a bill, AB 2607, that attempted to deal with the phenomenon of crossover youth staying in juvenile hall after they're supposed to be released, so staying in jail after they're supposed to be released because their foster care status has been switched off. This year, SB 12 by Senator Bell is in part premised on, quote, this is from the Senate floor analysis, implementation of WIC 24.1.1 has been inconsistent throughout the state. So with that, respectfully ask for your aye vote and look forward to gathering this information to help our most vulnerable kids.
Thank you very much. I understand that one of the agency is here, the Deputy Director of the Department of Children and Family Services. Would you please come forward? One other supporter as well. And the director. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. Susanna Niffen with Children Now, and we're here as folks who've tried to work on this issue for many years, and one of the barriers that we continue to have when trying to piece together change for these children is what's actually happening on the ground, how's it working, how's it, how are the different counties doing this, and because we don't know, it's been very hard to do any policy in this area, so we're just asking that you guys do this research and really make sure that we know what's going on so we can move forward and impact these youth.
Great. Thank you very much. The department, please come forward. Would ask you to please take a seat at the table. Please introduce yourselves.
Good morning. I'm Relda Shabazz with the Department of Children and Family Services and Deputy Director over Juvenile Court Services. And we have a very robust 241.1 section down in LA County. We have data to support it. We have a strong partnership with probation as well as our juvenile court.
Good morning, Chair Gibson and members. Will Lightbourne, Director of the California Department of Social Services. We, of course, would cooperate in all ways with the state auditor. We've had 7 or 8 audits from various sources. California State Auditor, the Federal Administration of Children and Families, OIG at the federal level, in various areas of child welfare, so we're experienced with it. The data, of course, that is primarily available is publicly available on the University of California, Berkeley website, and we'd be happy to sort of point folk to that. The couple of comments I would make regarding this, as was noted, the choice of different models is optional to the counties, and any sort of change to that would probably be considered a policy issue, and so hopefully would be reviewed with policy committees. In addition, the California Child Welfare Council, which was established by the legislature and co-chaired by the Secretary of Health and Human Services and designee of the Chief Justice, includes practitioners, advocates, administration, both from child welfare and probation and the bench. So I would hope that the auditor would have an opportunity to review thinking, findings, concerns with the Child Welfare Council, as that has been a primary source of surfacing major policy initiatives in the state, like the efforts to address commercial sexual exploitation of children, foster child education, and other major initiatives like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We want to entertain any questions from the committee. No? Okay. Ms. Howe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, as Ms. Eggman indicated, we will be looking at not only dual status counties but non-dual status counties. She's asked us to go to 6 different counties, 3 dual status and 3 non-dual status, to be able to hopefully collect information so we can do some comparisons with respect to case management efforts, the types of services that are provided to the youth in each of those counties. So it's important to collect that information. She has asked us to look at Los Angeles County, but we will select the other 5 counties. Certainly try to get certainly 3 dual status, 3 non-dual status. In addition, at a selection of those same counties, look at certain types of outcomes for the youth, and this is specific to the juvenile justice system, convictions and sentences for the juvenile offenses, the length of time as far as their involvement in the criminal justice system, recidivism rates, rates of reentry into the foster care system, the types of placements for these youth, and how many of those individuals actually graduate from high school or the equivalent of graduation from high school. Again, trying to collect information, and this would be across all 6 counties, again, to help hopefully allow for some comparisons between the dual status and the non-dual status counties. In addition, she's asked us for those 3 dual status counties that we go to, really looking to see what type of coordination and collaboration is occurring between child welfare services and the probation departments. Are they working together to meet the needs of these crossover youth? In addition, how well are those 3 counties collecting data with respect to crossover youth? In those counties, how often and under what conditions are they deeming foster youth to have dual status? So really understanding how that works. Comparing some of the practices and protocols that we use here in California to practices nationally. There's a lot of information at the national level. Certainly the Robert F. Kennedy Juvenile Justice and Child Welfare Services Center, they have put out some publications. They have some really helpful information that we intend to use during the course of the audit. They talk about some other states that have done quite well. One county we may consider going to is Santa Clara. Based on some of the research I did over the last couple of days, they seem to be a model for a very successful dual status model and have worked with the Kennedy Center. So that's one that we would contemplate taking a look at during the course of the audit. In addition, for these 3 dual status counties, again, determine the extent to which they have established timelines for crossover youth for their dual status determination, the timeline for trying to reunify those children with their families, and any other efforts to either place them find a permanent placement for them if family reunification is not the best option for the child. Also looking at continuity of services. So are the same attorneys working with those children, those crossover youth? Is it the same advocate for that child, the same social worker for that child? So looking at that as well. That continuity seems to be very, very important and one factor for success for kids in the system. Also, why for these 3 non-dual status counties, what's their rationale for deciding not to go dual status? She really wants us to understand what's the driving factors behind their decision to not switch over to dual status arrangements. For the 6 counties, again, we're back to the 6 counties, looking at training, management, what kind of oversight is provided to not only the social workers but the probation officers. Are there differences in funding between dual status counties and non-dual status counties as far as the types of services that are provided to the youth? And then looking at AB 129 is the bill that allowed for dual status and allowed counties to choose the option. Another requirement in that bill was placed upon Judicial Council for them to put some reports together with respect to protocols, guidance, etc., and then they've done some updates. Their first report was in 2007, and then they've had a couple of updates since then. She specifically is asking us to look at how much progress has been made since 2007 and 2008 when these 3 specific issues were identified. Poor communication and collaboration between the agencies, probation and social or welfare services, a misunderstanding, lack of knowledge among the various participants on what their responsibilities are, what kind of guidance is provided to them, and then what is the state doing, what state agencies or what agencies at the state level are involved, certainly social services, in providing assistance to the counties that either are dual status or are non-dual status. So really following up on some of the concerns and issues that the Judicial Council raised in their analyses back in 2007 and 2008 are the 2 reports that I reviewed prior to today's hearing. We budgeted this audit at about a little over 4,800 hours. It's a large audit, but that's because we're looking at 6 different counties. We're collecting a lot of information. As I indicated in my opening remarks as far as our status report, our intent would be to put 2 teams on this audit so that we can get it done and have it available to the legislature when you return in January. I believe that's doable. And we have plenty of resources to be able to do that. So that would be our intent, to put enough resources on this audit to have the information for you sometime in hopefully January of next year.